help communities grow from the inside as a member, you and the community benefit together, and you feel a sense of belonging, which really goes a long way. I see a lot of entrepreneurs that try and exploit something because they see a commercial opportunity, and it just feels inauthentic and it doesn't get you the long term.
Are you a solopreneur looking to 2 times your revenue to fund your lifestyle and give back? Well, this podcast is for you. We bring you inspirational guests sharing actionable tips to solve many of the struggles you face each and every day. And now over to your host, Paul Higgins.
Hello to the Build, Live, Give podcast. If you're a first-time listener, welcome. And if you're a regular, thanks for your support. Our guest today is someone who was given an amazing break at college to combine his love for music with one of the greatest lifestyle brands on the planet, Red Bull. He was then tapped on the shoulder to work for Spotify. You know, they've only got a mere 240 million subscribers to take their digital assets into live experiences. The growing pains at Spotify took their toll, and when his wife was given the opportunity to move to Denmark for a new career, he decided to leave Spotify and set up his own consulting business. So what you'll learn from this podcast is behind the scenes view into 2 amazing companies. Just think he's, worked for Red Bull and Spotify. You'll also get a sense of where podcasting is heading and how that will impact the small end of town, and also the importance of business development and 2 approaches he's using to really kick his business off, given the fact that it's only 7 months old. At the end, I'll give you my top 3 takeaways. So what I'll do now is hand you over to Josh Greenberg from Green Mountain Lodge. Welcome, Josh Greenberg from Green Mountain Lodge to the Build, Live, Give podcast. Josh, great to have you here.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, so why don't we kick off with something that your family or friends would know about you that we wouldn't?
Sure. So although I've had a career that runs pretty deep between, music and brand stuff, I definitely have a huge passion for concept and boutique hotel concepts. And although I'm not really working in the field directly, my career's kind of given me this blessing to travel around the world and utilize that nice T&E resource to internationally research a bunch of different approaches. So I've got kind of a nice aggregate of ideas and foundation to potentially establish my own property at some point. I just really love what hotels represent, and they act as a community center or town hall for, people visiting and the locals who sort of drive local culture. And I think it's an interesting thing in a time where people are so technologically isolated that, I tend to spend a lot of time trying to empower technology to help people connect with each other.
Yes.
And I guess, today's hotel experience is like the perfect intersection of that. It has like, you need the technology to book the hotel, you utilize technology within the environment, but all those technologies are empowered to give you a more human experience. Because you have Maslowian needs you need to solve with sleeping and eating and bathing and whatever, but then you're also trying to fulfill this self-actualized version of yourself. So I think that's, that's something that only people close to me really know.
Yeah, brilliant. And look, I hear you. Actually, last night my wife and I had a night at the, sort of a gold class. I don't know if that transfers across the world, but it's basically premium cinema, which was a great experience. And then we went to a hotel, and I totally get it. It's great. And do you think it's, is it very different boutique hotels? Are they very different by country? Like, is there some countries that are doing it really, really well versus others, or is it more who's running them?
I mean, I think it's actually much more about the entrepreneur. I kind of, thinking about this and kind of preparing for this, I've been thinking quite a bit about it. And, I had a mentor at one point that told me quite clearly, like, I asked him if I needed to go and get more education in the hotel space in order to like do this if I wanted to at some point. And he told me pretty clearly, absolutely not. He's looking for people that can bring vision. He's looking for people that can bring concept and idea and innovation to something. If he needs a general manager, he can go out and hire somebody, but he can't go out and hire visionary people. Mm-hmm. And so it's really something where, I feel like it's more about the person and their intent, what they're trying to deliver as far as a brand. The people who go into that vision only business and monetization in mind might be a little let down with the results. So it's got to be an intersection of both.
Yeah, brilliant. And look, I know you've worked for some amazing and visionary brands, Red Bull, Spotify, just, brilliant examples of that. Why don't you
Sure.
tell us a little bit about, I suppose, what you did there and more importantly, why the transition into Green Mountain Lodge?
Yeah, sure. So I guess, my origins in life kind of come from music and sports. I played in bands my whole life. I played competitive football, or soccer for the Americans listening into this,
Yes.
and skated and surfed and snowboarded in between. And I went to school in LA, and that kind of gave me a paradise of like all of the above. I studied studio music production. I built a life around me that I kind of wanted to live that intersected all those things. And at the same time, piracy sort of came into the music ecosystem. And, I wasn't sure I wanted to follow a traditional route into like music engineering or production because the money was gone. People weren't investing in that product because you could make product at home and it wasn't necessarily selling. So in a nice random connection of events, I ended up connecting with some of the Red Bull guys around some music stuff. They offered me a job while I was still in school, basically doing collegiate music and sports marketing programs, exactly what I wanted to be doing, with a fee attached. And that was 2001. And it was a new brand in the US at the time. It embraced a real entrepreneurial spirit, gave me the ability to kind of bring good ideas to life with authentic commitments to like cultures and scenes. And, it was pretty amazing because I learned the business from the inside of that. And while all my friends were going for MBAs, they were coming back and telling me what they were studying in school was what I was doing for work. So they were getting lectures on Red Bull and what we were doing to disrupt the marketplace. And so that was a pretty flattering opportunity. And I ended up staying with them for about 14 years, growing through the organization and continuously being involved in sort of shaping how music and culture stayed connected to the brand and helped drive the lifestyle component of what Red Bull was. And then towards the end of that, it actually moved me from Los Angeles to Salzburg, Austria, to work in HQ leading global live music for them.
And Josh, what was, because a lot of people see the external brand and, me coming from a Coke background, used to really, study Red Bull a lot, but it was always from the outside, right? What was the culture like in the inside? Was it, same as the brand externally? Was it different? Just tell us a little bit about the behind the scenes. What's the culture like at Red Bull?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I rode through kind of the full journey. I'd say, if anybody called it a corporation in 2001, they'd probably get let go. It was not something we wanted to celebrate. It was much more entrepreneurial and sort of locally driven with, local faces to this global brand concept. And I would say, that the company was forced to mature against competition and sort of the overall marketplace. And you had a lot more skill set sort of come into it. But I would say, lifestyle wise, they definitely celebrated working hard and living hard. And that those two things intersected, and very rarely was somebody a part of Red Bull that didn't participate in the lifestyle that it communicated to the world. So you had a lot of people that
you really
exactly
yeah
for both the acceleration of aging that went along with it, and for all the fun that took place.
Yeah, well, look, it was interesting because, I was trying to, as I said, pre-show, we launched an energy drink, and I was trying to bring that spirit into the Titanic, and it was just so hard to turn the Coca-Cola company around. Brilliant at what they do, but it was really, really hard yards, and I used to just scratch my head and just think, wow, I just don't know if we're going to get there. And anyway, they bought some brands and they've got along. But yeah, Red Bull's been excellent. So you go to Austria, that all works well.
That works
what
well.
Happened? What happened post there?
Yeah, I get a phone call from Spotify saying they're looking to build live as an extension of the Spotify brand, and that just immediately piques my interest. And start talking to them about what that looks like. And they basically gave me the space with a new role as global head of experiential marketing to build a strategy and a team that would deliver the entire offline brand experience of Spotify. And both work from a central HQ level and then also with all the local markets and trying to bring that to life. So that was definitely a privilege, and got in there, got my hands dirty, got a lot of work done at a pretty quick pace. I joined that company at 1,100 employees. I left that company 2 years later at 4,200. It accelerated really rapidly, and for all of the growth that we saw on the consumer side of the equation, the challenges that also come along with any company that grows at that speed, created some tense environments within the structure that kind of had to navigate. And I'd say kind of 2017, end of 2017, 2018, I definitely found myself, a bit more stressed professionally than I ever had, and started looking at, new opportunities and stuff primarily back in Europe, because it just felt like it was a good connection for us. And my wife actually ended up getting an opportunity in Copenhagen, Denmark, which is one of our favorite cities in the world. And I was so relieved. I was like, this is amazing, because I can be a support to her. She's moved twice around the world for me. Now I can be a support to her for a dream job that she wants. And it also gives me the space to be able to kind of sit back and figure out what it is I exactly want to do. And as I kind of got to the market and met with people and talked about where I could make an impact, it was pretty clear that like operating my own shop would give me sort of the ability to play in all the spaces I enjoy, between kind of, music, technology, brand, culture, hospitality, food, all of that could come together underneath one house. So from that, Green Mountain Lodge was born, and here we are.
Brilliant. Well, look, we'll dive a little more into that in a moment in the build section, but just back on Spotify for a moment. So
Sure.
First, so when you say live, is that, purely live music? Is that what you mean? No?
It's actually, there is a clear part of that. Absolutely. But it's not limited to that at all. So it was sort of the intersection of, places where we could take the digital proposition of Spotify and extract it into the physical world. So things like, how do you make a playlist come to life? So we launched, Rap Caviar Live as a live touring proposition, or Who We Be, which is one of the biggest kind of grime and urban playlists in the UK. We created a 10,000 cap, capacity concert series around that. So taking the playlist and making them live, but also, finding opportunities where artists were marketing new content, and Spotify having the data and understanding who that audience was. How could we create environments where we could bring the most passionate fans of that artist and that artist together and let them intersect and meet in an environment that we created together? That's very similar to what Spotify creates digitally. How do we create that physically? We did that with the industry. We did that with, college students or family campaigns, all things like that. It also was, we were responsible for producing how the company came out for our investor day and our IPO launch. We were involved in any product launches, anything where it was a translation of this digital proposition into the physical world. We were the team building the strategy and sort of the ideas behind how that came to life.
Great. And, obviously I've got a love for podcasting, and, I just love to get a bit of an insight from you as where you think Spotify are potentially going as a podcast player.
Sure. I mean, it's something I was able to kind of see and watch quite closely. I've been a podcast consumer for quite a while, in that, and you could see pretty clearly that Spotify had an intent in diversifying the content offering beyond simply, recorded music. Part of that has to do with the license structures, but part of that also has to do with the consumer desire for a broad spectrum of content. And so, you saw Spotify start to go into video and other things that way. The natural behavior for most consumers using Spotify is to play it via their phone, put it in their pocket, put their headphones on. And so podcasting was sort of a natural progression of that. And I think the thing that's really interesting is not only do they have the ability to be a distributor in the space and aggregate all the content that is available out there, but subsequently they've really invested in developing their own content that fills certain gaps in the market. And because of the size and scale that they operate, they can do that. And now I think the interesting trend is that there's a lot of acquisition happening. So obviously Spotify's recently acquired Gimlet and, a few other players. And I think you see that across Pandora and other players in the marketplace. There's a lot of aggregation sort of happening now. So I think you'll see that trend continue for a little while where, the big houses and big shops will end up becoming more power content players in that space.
Yeah, and for the a lot of people out here listening have got their own podcasts. How do you think that will impact them longer term? It'll end up being like I suppose Google and Facebook, nearly being too expensive for small businesses to advertise in some space in some places because the big guys have started to take over. Do you think a similar thing will happen with Spotify?
I don't believe so, because there isn't really an advertising strategy within Spotify, right? It's pretty democratic as far as how the audience consumes the product. Like you can't advertise your content up inside that. So artists don't have that freedom. Same thing with podcast players. That's not available. Now you can be an advertiser on the free platform, but that's not necessarily going to direct to specific listens to your platform. So I think most of the advertising efforts that are required have to happen off platform to drive audiences in.
Yes.
But if you build an audience that naturally consumes your podcast product on Spotify, the ability to understand the analytics that go along with that are pretty rich, because Spotify's analytics platform that it serves back to its creators is pretty robust. And subsequently, I think the algorithms and sort of the recommendations engines, based on the scale of their audience, I mean, you're talking 240 million people utilizing Spotify around the world currently. If the recommendations come up in your favor and people have a certain propensity to listen to one type of podcast or another, you can kind of ride that wave. So it's definitely, playing into the strengths of the machine, and then letting the machine play into the strengths for you.
Right. And do you think strategically, Spotify, they're sort of rubbing their hands that Apple are going after the Netflix and I suppose more down that path, and therefore, I suppose podcasts Apple don't do a lot with because, they don't monetize it, or there is very little way of monetizing it. But I think, the subscription-based model of Spotify is great. Do you think that's a bit of a win for Spotify, that Apple are going to, play more down the Netflix path?
I mean, I think the interesting behavior is that Apple was way earlier invested into podcasts as a distribution platform. And so there's a native listening behavior that's embedded for a lot of people, that's where they consume their podcast product. So I don't think it's something that they're going to deprioritize. It's just a matter of, what Apple has 17 different fronts that they're battling at one time. Spotify provides one product to the marketplace, so it's just more about focus. Yes. And it's not to say that one is going to do it necessarily better than the other. It's just that Spotify probably has a lot more resources to prioritize that platform and become, a more significant player in that space at a certain pace.
Yeah, brilliant, great. And, with the move, so you're roughly 7 months in, has it been easier or harder so far than you thought?
I think the move's been easier. It's definitely freed me up, but moving into my own business structure, no question, it's definitely harder. I'm still in the foundations now. We only moved to Denmark, last July, but I started the company about November. But not only did I start my own business, but it's also in this new city across the world with only a handful of kind of music industry relationships and no real built-in support system. So if I built this in Los Angeles, I feel like my confidence and my immediate success would be much more rapid. But, I'm currently building a network here in this market while concurrently also operating a new business in this market. And I'm quite invested into, not only the international business that I build with my firm and my company, but also my local community, because I want to be a part of it. So it's definitely a unique, opportunity, but I also have a USP here, being an international thinker, to kind of serve local needs that gives me quite a bit of a unique thing. So I think, I'm figuring out how to operate my own business without the stability of a paycheck coming in every month that I'm used to. It's that I have to go out and, get the biz dev and the sort of client development accomplished at a certain rate that still doesn't mean that I'm spending, while at Spotify I could have 10 meetings a day and all of them could be speculative. I don't have the freedoms to do that.
Yes.
Do that currently. I have to monetize the business alongside doing what I'm doing. So I'm definitely spoiled in that way that I've had that freedom.
Yes.
But now it's definitely, a clearer resource allocation to what is paid client work and what is biz dev and what is me time.
Yes, yeah. No, look, that's a balance, or the three juggling balls that I think, are so right, or so important to get right at the start. And as far as who's supporting you, do you have a mentor, a coach, and part of a mastermind? Who's supporting you 7 months in?
Yeah, I mean, if you have someone in mind, please throw it across. No, I mean, full transparency. No one really related to the business that I'm running, and I kind of wish there was. I think, as I say, like a lot of my network isn't in this market, and staying connected to people around the world is good in a supportive way, but it's not necessarily that engaged in a true mentorship capacity. But similarly, I'm sort of using Copenhagen and the city that I'm in as my muse in an interesting way. I'm really investing into this scene and being honest about where I'm at and what I'm trying to do. And I feel like the scene, the city, sort of the dynamics of what they do here is feeding back to me in a way that is sort of coaching me because I'm trying to think about business in a different way. And I think Danes have got a lot of things figured out, and it's really helping quite a bit. But in parallel, in my hotel interests, my mentorship quiver is in a good space, but that's not so much related to the Green Mountain Lodge proposition.
Okay, great. And now we'll go into the build section. So when someone says, "Hey, Josh, what do you do for a living?" how do you answer that?
I laugh because I feel like this is the question of my entire career. When you tell somebody you do culture marketing for Red Bull, they're like, "What does that mean?" And then you have to go in and further define it's music and art and film and fashion and dance and design and all of the components that's involved in the brand. It's like you have to elaborate. And then when you tell people you do experiential marketing at Spotify, they're like, "What does that mean?" And you have to go in and elaborate it. So I think the interesting thing as I got to building my own firm is I actually aim to create a metaphor to the sense of environment that I'm trying to build and the type of creative intersection that exists between the creativity and innovation, audience insights, brand, all of this coming together. Green Mountain Lodge is like the philosophical hotel where you book your offsite creative session, right? It's like the place that you come to because you need to clear your head. You need to get away from sort of the day-to-day components that operate your business. And you need someone that's sort of a Swiss Army knife to work with you with, specialized tools and resources for each client at their, at the point that they're at. So it's very difficult to clearly put a singular point. It's not like I help somebody optimize their Google ad spend. It's it's a function that can be provided, but for some clients, it's broad artist management and creative advisory. For some, it's music supervision on film and TV, and others, it's broad marketing strategy and channel planning. I have a client that I'm only doing strategic ops and HR for, based on kind of his philosophical evolution for what he's doing. But it's just this access of kind of global network of culturally connected people that can work together to bring something to life. And so it's not the easiest sell. But in a music and tech economy where, teams can be thin, it's pretty valuable for people to have like one player that can offer a pretty deep quiver of skills to be applied to their needs.
Right, brilliant. And sort of at the moment, what is your absolute key focus? What's Josh spending most of his time on?
Well, I think it's a lot of investing in relationships in the community. I'm pretty clear that I'm not going to earn long-term, culturally aligned, mutually committed clients from like first-time phone calls or push marketing efforts. Yes. It's nice and it might be fun and we're going to get some money, and whatever is going to come into it. But that's us sleeping together. We're not like dating, and I love when you kind of have a coffee meeting with somebody as an introduction. Then we end up running into each other at like a gig or a festival or a conference. Not long after we have a beer, and then one of their friends mentions my name to them, and randomly I get the email like, "Josh, I need to bring you in on a project." Like it's pretty hard to measure the attributable ROI on that series of interactions, but the amount of times that I hear from people like, "Man, you seem to be everywhere right now." Like that's a pretty good indicator for me that I'm top of mind, especially when I'm sort of remotely isolated in Copenhagen, Denmark, and I'm still hearing that from people in LA, New York, London, etc.
Great. And is there any particular platform? I know, you've talked about getting local with Copenhagen, but is there any particular platform that you're using to build those relationships?
I mean, I think LinkedIn is an obvious one, right? That's how we connected. That's how, I think most of this professional world is connecting. Yes. But I think similarly, I also aim to translate a LinkedIn conversation off platform as quick as possible. I feel like if I just friend someone randomly and nothing happens, it just sort of dies.
Yes.
I'm pretty targeted about who I'm connecting with, and I also pay for the premium LinkedIn and see who's creeping on my page. And if there's somebody that's of interest that I'd like to connect to, I also call them out on the fact that they were creeping on my page, and say, hey, you were coming by. I'm interested in what brought you in. Can we connect and see what it is? Feel free to reach out to me at my email and go from there. So I definitely use that platform, but I think the other piece of that is that I just spend a lot of time in the market. Like, I'm a music fan anyway. So the fact that my business is, for the most part music and brand driven, I spend time in the places where I feel like those people would spend time, and you end up, being introduced to different people. So LinkedIn definitely works as a broad level tactic, but I also think facial visibility is a highly important strategy.
Great. Well, look, speaking of LinkedIn, so before we go into the live section, I'd like to talk about some of the killer content you can get on LinkedIn through our profile. So if you go to Build, Live, Give as a company and you look for me as an employee, that's probably the easiest way to find me on LinkedIn, and send me a personalized invite. So I'm like Josh, I like to know why you'd love to connect. So say that you heard Josh on this podcast and say that's why you'd love to connect. And then you'll get access to all of our posts. I post daily, and it's all about helping solopreneurs to double their business, to fund their lifestyle and give back. And that's, the whole ethos behind Build, Live, Give. So now onto the live section. I nearly said live because we've mentioned live a couple of times
Live.
on the podcast.
That's good.
Because some people say build, live, give. I'm like, no, it's
Yeah.
actually, but I didn't think of that when I first named the company. But, tell me about some daily habits that really help you be successful.
Sure. So I think, one of the first things is we live about 200 meters from a beautiful forest, and another 300 meters into that are a pretty stunning lake. And more often than not, I aim to take my dog for a walk in the mornings, leave my phone at home. And it's basically a meditative space. It really gives me some space to work things out. More often than not, I come back from those walks and have to get to my computer or phone and write down 2 to 3, new ideas or concepts that came from it. It's really kind of a meditative process. I spend a good 15 to 20 minutes each morning working my calendar. It seems a little, OCD, but I really sit there and I input space, for work. I input space for family. I input space to eat in some cases, to move, for music, for shows, all of the above. It really gives me a lot of clarity of how I'm allocating my most valuable resource, which is my time. Then, I'd say another daily habit is, it's sort of Danish of us, but we're living life just outside Copenhagen without a car. So it's basically bikes and trains for us at all times. And the best part of that is that, I take the bike on the train for free. I use this time strategically to kind of process meetings and plan strategies. I bounce from client to client on the bike when I'm in the city. The bike gets kind of my blood flowing and activates different muscles. Being on the train, bouncing in and out of the city gives me time to ramp up the day and sort of decompress a bit. If I was in the car, I'd definitely be on calls, all the time, and I wouldn't have that space. So I think those are 3 kind of daily habits that I use every day.
Brilliant. And on average, how many hours a week are you working at the moment, 7 months in?
It's really variable, but I'd say on average, probably 30, about 30, 35, something like that. And it really, again, some weeks if I'm, out of the country, diving in on different client meetings or helping a project get up, it'll be 70 or 80 in that week. And then the following week, I'll do my part to pull it back to 10 to 15 just to make time for what I missed while I was gone.
Okay, great. And Laura, who, as you said, brought you to Copenhagen in the first place with her dream job, which is fantastic. But what sort of support has she given you? So when she's listening right now, as she listens right now, what would you like to say about the support she's given you?
I mean, she's definitely my rock. Like we're quite transparent about what we're doing together at each stage of our personal and professional lives. But I'm not an easy emotional toy to maintain. And she's been nothing but supportive in the process of me leaving sort of the corporate stability behind for something that we both see as greater. Without it, I probably would have created like a self-assumed pressure to provide and rushed out and taken a job to ensure we had that stability. But now things are getting quite a bit more comfortable, and she's always had belief that this was something I should be doing. So I'm quite appreciative of all the support she's returned to me in this, in this journey.
Brilliant. Well, the next section is the give section. So what's a charity or a community that you're passionate about and why?
Right. So music education in schools is something I've worked in and out of for a lot of years. I've commonly rallied the organizations that I'm working with to play a more forward and ongoing role in this. To be totally honest, I'm not doing as much as I'd like to these days. And this question sort of called me out on that a little bit. So that's a good thing. But it's an important issue, and it's commonly, one of the first programs that's cut in the budget because it's an assumed expense. Mm-hmm. But I think for the most part, it's because administrators have a predefined knowledge of what music education is, and it's a bit outdated. It's less about the instruments and more about activating that part of the brain. It's not about like sheet music and a grand piano. It's there's a proven connection between students' success in math and science and art and business if they're involved in music space. And there's more and more cost-effective digital tools than ever before that kids can access and engage with, not only at school, but they can access the exact same product, at home. And we're seeing a lot of growth and continuity with kids that are learning some of those skills at school and then taking some of that stuff away. So I definitely am doing my part to try and fight for, more visibility, more awareness, more access for that at an education level.
Yeah, great. And, as I say to all guests, you're 7 months into something that's completely new in a new country. So, I can hear the passion. I know you'll get there, but it's, it's also about balancing that build, live, give at the moment. And I think, give will definitely come. So the last section's the action section, where I'll ask you some quick questions and get some rapid responses. So the first one is, what are your top 3 personal effectiveness tips?
Sure. So the first one is schedule time for your own time and call it a client meeting. So I say this to a lot of people, but it's not professional to cancel on a retained client you have. So don't cancel on yourself in lieu of something that comes up late. Sometimes I'll reschedule meetings myself, but only if it doesn't compromise, how successful I can be and what I'm trying to achieve. And that includes family dinner or going to a show or napping, right? So creating that's a personal effective tip. Two, don't exploit a community until you're a part of it. Help communities grow from the inside as a member. You and the community benefit together, and you feel a sense of belonging, which really goes a long way. I see a lot of entrepreneurs that try and exploit something because they see a commercial opportunity, and it just feels inauthentic and it doesn't get you the long term. So really, I definitely, do that. And then the final piece for me, and I think this is the same for a lot of the world, and I can tell you from the data at Spotify, I know it is, but if music is a catalyst, for you, like it is for me, be your own music supervisor. I genuinely soundtrack my life. I consider what I'm trying to achieve and, what I feel like the sonic companion is to that. And it sets a rhythm to my life and helps me move at a pace or a beat, that I want to achieve.
Brilliant. Excellent. And, you've talked about tech and how tech allows, people to have those human experiences like in the boutique hotels. But what's some of the tech, in the first 7 months for you to run your business that you wouldn't do without or couldn't do without?
Sure. I'm Google dependent. And I use the entire suite. I mean, I execute 50 to 60% of my meetings on Google Meet or Hangouts. I'm using the calendar functions. I've actually pretty much moved away from most of the Microsoft suite and have gone to Google Slides, Google Sheets, and Google Docs for everything, because I like the collaborative nature and the feedback with people around the world that I'm working with. Post-it notes. I know it doesn't sound like a technology, but it's one of the most important business innovations of the last century. And I definitely, it's not about their daily use, but it's more about creativity and exploration. I'm not sure I could be successful in developing new ideas and concepts for partners or for myself if I didn't have 2 to 3 of those pads laying around that I could just throw 50 to 70 pieces up on a wall at one time. Yeah. Project-wise, I use Trello to organize multiple workflows. I build most of my web products on Squarespace, and most of the clients I work with, if they're trying to communicate something quite simple, Squarespace is that. And then because I'm a music guy, obviously I'm Spotify dependent from a discovery side, but I'm analog on most of my music, but I utilize Pro Tools and Machine for both my production and sequencing stuff.
Brilliant. And for you, you're constantly innovating, and I love the fact that, you take that time in the morning, et cetera. But what other sources provide you research and knowledge?
Sure. So, I mean, on a tactical side, there's a daily email that comes across from a group called Music Ally. They're out of the UK. There's this nice kind of smart and snarky fellow Stuart Dredge that writes it, but it's probably the most current music tech brand aggregation platform, and you can sign up for that as an email. So I get that every day. That gives me a clear idea of what's happening at certain pace. I listen to Mark Maron's WTF podcast with a unreasonable addiction. He's just passed like 1,000 episodes. I think I've probably done 700 of them over its life cycle. And I think it's just a really good look into the commitment of successful people and sort of their vulnerability around, their public facing role in society. And he's definitely, one of the best interviewers I've ever heard. And then there's some good books, in the conversation. I really like David Byrne's book about how music works. This is not a book on music. It's a book on anthropology and life. And I think, I definitely encourage people to read it. If you don't know who David Byrne is, he's the lead singer of the Talking Heads. Yeah. There's lots more, but I think that's probably a good starting point.
Yeah, no, great. Brilliant. And this is a big question, but I saved it to last. But what's the impact that you want to leave on the world?
I guess, am I positively helping the discovery, the shape, and the shift of culture? And I'd say, that's for myself and like my own beliefs. That's for my family and like our shared life together. That's for my community and like our cohesive sense of bonding or belonging. That's my clients and their business. That's for music and its role as like a defining characteristic of all these previously mentioned, areas and the whole of our shared human experience. Like if I can say I'm helping versus exploiting, then I'm definitely on the right path.
Brilliant. Well, look, you can find out a lot more about Josh at greenmountainlodge.com. Is that right, Josh?
.dk.
.dk, sorry, of course, because you're in Denmark, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you can find out a lot more about Josh there. We'll put all the great links and all of the information in the show notes. But Josh, brilliant to connect with you today. Really loved what you've done in your past. You've worked some amazing companies, and I'm sure you can transfer a lot of that knowledge to people. So if you're listening and you want to, basically find out more about Josh, go to the website, follow him on LinkedIn. And Josh, brilliant having you on the show.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
That was such a great interview by Josh, and he's got so much passion about what he does, but also shared some great experiences around the brands he's worked for. So my 3 key takeouts. One was the power of a company's culture. So I loved how the culture, particularly of Red Bull, was the same in and out. The second was great content will always win on the Spotify platform, and he explains why that's the case. And then the third is the morning routine. I just love how it's analog and how he goes about creating new ideas for his business. So you can get the links and action notes in the show notes. So you go to buildlivegive.com/podcast. And if you know someone that would make a great guest for the show, or you'd love to be a guest, just email support@buildlivegive.com. Please take action to build your business, to fund your lifestyle, and to give back.
Thank you for listening to the Build, Live, Give podcast. If you like what you heard, please subscribe and leave us a review. It would mean the world to us.